Morning ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another day of the video diary. And how's it going today? Today I am working in here on my own. It's 10 o'clock, it's a Friday, no uni today. What is the plan of attack, ladies and gentlemen? The plan of attack is that we are to get my test runner running properly. So the plan, right, basically then, what I want to do with the internal test runner doesn't seem like it's going to be easily possible. It relies very heavily on, very possible, and it works for the majority of things. However, what it doesn't work for is Microsoft Fakes. And Microsoft Fakes is something that I use heavily. It's something that my target test solutions use heavily, and it's something that I need to be able to support. Which means I've got to go back and start focusing again on controlling how we manage the test runners directly. So I'm going to have to go back and try and use VS Test Runner, which is the supported way of using this MS Fake stuff. So it's all very well and good. It's very interesting. The obvious downside of this is that I've already had problems doing this, so it's going to be relatively difficult to do that. I'm not deleting my internal test runner because it will work for other frameworks that don't require things like that. Potentially down the line I could get it working. I spent a lot of time diving around in the registry trying to figure out if it was registering things there, because it's giving me notes back in the error log saying couldn't find this in the registry, so I'm trying to force Visual Studio to put it in. She's currently, Atlas now, is currently running away for a test that has an infinite loop in it. And I'm trying to I'm searching through the registry trying to spot where it's pulling out the thing that it needs to pull out. Can't find it. Either way, whatever I'm doing, I feel like it's wrong. I feel like whatever I'm trying to do is something semi-illegal, trying to dive in the registry to find these things that I need. Not illegal, but against the designers. They've obviously deliberately made it difficult for people to do this, and therefore I probably shouldn't do it. It's probably possible, somehow, but I'm not going to sit and devote a million hours to getting that sorted. I'm going to keep it in there. I'm going to keep the tests, that test runner available, although I'm going to roll back any changes I made that made it start calling stuff, basically. So I'll just leave it there, leave it tested and all that kind of good stuff, and then if I come to the point where I start to need to support NUnit or something, and I don't want to use the NUnit test runner for some reason, then I've got it built up, basically. I've already started it, there's no point binning it outright. So, the focus is to concentrate on the programming of words escaping me at the moment. I am focusing on getting this VS Test Runner working better, which means that if it goes into an infinite loop, I need to be able to detect that and kill it outright. I've got a couple of ideas of how to do that. Otherwise, how we detect the infinite loop is a different question. Do we go through and call every single method in turn? Because at the moment what I do for VS Test Runner is I run it with a logger, I capture the results file, analyse them, and do that. If it goes into an infinite loop and I kill it, the results file is not going to exist, so I don't get any feedback from that infinite loop run. Obviously the amount of feedback you're going to get back is limited anyway, because it's kind of a null point. It's a failed mutant, whatever you've done, so it's not really a matter to me. But is it better to call it one by one? Here's the thing, right? It's awkward to ask the user to input an expected maximum amount of time. I think it's awkward to make them go, okay, the tests are expected to run this amount of time, because if they throw in 20 threads, the tests are going to take longer because their computer can't hack it. If I run it on Atlas, on my Surface, they take over a minute. I mean, you could put some bullshit 10 minutes. It's never going to take 10 minutes. But then if it runs into an infinite loop, then you've killed a thread stream for 10 minutes while it sits and waits. So that's not good. So the better thing to do is to call each method individually. Well, two options. To have a timer on each method, so you're not expecting a single test to take over 200 milliseconds, or over 2 seconds, let's say. If it does, then that's a killed test, it kills it, whatever. Question is, Do I do that by calling the test runner to run each test individually and giving each test runner then a loop? Or do I manipulate the tests to include a timeout? This is sketchy for me because I didn't want to edit the tests in any way. I wanted the tests to remain the same. But I think it's the best way of going about it, because the way that MS Test picks out infinite loops and things like that is you can put a timeout in the attribute tag. So I can go in there and go, right, where it says test method, I can put, wait, hold on. So for example here, I can have a test which has this implicit timeout malarkey. So in theory, although I have just pressed debug on it, so that wasn't necessarily true, I don't know if it'll work with this infinite loop here. It should run for 600 milliseconds and kill it. I'm not entirely sure if it will because we're debugging. No, but it killed it and it failed. So that seems like the best way to do it. One, I can't expect the users to put that tag in. Two, it's because I didn't want to edit the tests. That's the problem. But I can't. There's no other way. There's no other way that's that elegant. And I mean, really, it's just a control find. More or less. I'm not changing the initial source, I'm changing my copied version of it. So I'm thinking of going down that route, to be honest. We'll see. It does mean that the test runner needs to... Well, yeah, well, okay. So otherwise though, I have done some other things. I've emailed off to my lecturer to confirm which papers I want to do for my coursework for HDI, which I selected them yesterday. One of them is a bit sketchy, like I was saying. I think I said this yesterday. Because it's not implicitly... It kind of infers a topic rather than is implicitly about the topic. It actively says the topic in it, but it infers it rather than deliberately goes in and analyses. It's like one of the topics is trust and security. Like, do you immediately trust a design or a website design? It then goes on to say like, trust implies, well no, a good design implies trust, and then goes on to infer whether people will like a design. So it's kind of like, it's a bit extended, so I'm going to make sure he agrees that it's an okay paper to do. And otherwise I have found a car that we're potentially going to go and look at buying tomorrow. It's a really good deal, so I wanted to go today, but Laura's not around because she's at work, so it's not really an option. But yeah, right away, that's enough rambling. We ought to get into some work. Trying at the moment, I'm very bloody trying to revert the changes I've made to this bloody file, and every time I check in, fucking Team Foundation server keeps reverting my changes or auto-merging them. So it breaks it again. I'm like, god damn, should at least give me the option to cancel the auto-merge. I'm very tempted just to delete it. It's really irritating. Oh, it's because I got to the point where I was kind of hacking it in to try and see if it was possible. I gave up. I was writing tests, and I got to a point where I gave up writing the tests so I could push forward and figure out if it's possible, and then I'd come back and write the tests. Pushing forward broke some tests, and now reverting the changes that broke the tests merges out and the tests break anyway, and oh. This project is so stressful, man. Okay, plan of attack. What is my plan of attack here? Bloody hell, problem solved, right? I've had to go into the Visual Studio settings and say, don't try an auto-merge. Because it auto-merged every bloody time. I had to keep rolling back. Oh, Christ, that was way more grief than it had to be. So I should now, in theory, be back to where I wanted to be with running this, because it's going to start running in a minute. There it goes. So I should be back now to running the tests via VS Test. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that mutation on the code, on the tests, to put an implicit timeout on all of them. I think that's the best way, to be honest. It's the most efficient way of doing it. It's a little bit rogue, but I mean there are a couple of, I just need it to work. This is the problem that I'm fighting with. There are things I want to do, there are things I want to stop, like I want to change the way certain things are done, I want to tidy areas up, but I don't have time to, because other things are now really bloody important. I need to just get to the point where I can shut this thing down. The problem with doing a project which you want to take beyond the remit of the final year project is that it's yours, it's like your baby. I don't want it to be bad, I want it to be really, really good. But there are areas where I have to cut corners because I just don't have the time. Oh no, I think I actively need to step away from it because I'm not in the mood and it's making me do bad design choices. God damn it. That fucking auto merge remit shit really pissed me off. Ladies and gentlemen, the problem I have now, I've had a cup of tea, I've calmed down for a bit, it's a decent amount of time's passed. The problem I have is that I need to be able to either, if I'm making changes to the tests, rather than making alterations to the test runners, then I need to figure out where and how I do that. The problem is, the way that I've spread everything out means that compiler doesn't have any links to the tests. The test doesn't have any link to the compiler, source doesn't have any link to anything. Everything goes via the main area. So the main area is the thing that has access to everything else. Okay, so like the optimal place to do this will be in the test runner, in that area, because that's the area that cares about the tests. Nowhere else touches tests at any point apart from pulling down the source code. So the problem with this is making the change that I want to make means having to recompile the code, which means that I'll have to somehow pass data back to the compiler in order to compile the changes. It also means that the test area will have to be able to have access to the code itself, which it doesn't currently have. It only has access to the built files. So it's not really an ideal thing, that, because it has to go back to the test thing, it has to make mutations. Right, so the obvious place to do it is within the mutation area. So the mutation area, that's the area that actively changes the code. However, it doesn't know what test framework it is. It ignores the tests so far. It doesn't have any test information. And the changes I'm going to make are completely based on the fact that it's using this version of this. Basically, it's using MS Test. What happens? Oh shit. What happens if... Can you use fakes in something that isn't MS Test? Because if so, that cocks everything up. Proposing prepare test solutions here, in between getting the test solution and compiling them. That's inside the startup controller. Because that way I can do it once. I can do it once, I pull everything down, make the mutations I need to make, then compile, then run the initial test suite. Oh, fuck, this is too much, this is too big a dependency, man. This is too much of a change. I can't do that. It's the best solution. No. Changing the code for that timeout tag is the best way of doing this. Like, outright the best way. But making that change requires so much information, like so much, because... Well, no, right, okay, we'll assume then that fakes can't be run by any other test runner. You can't use fakes within NUnit, surely, because it requires... Let me check this. Ugh. No, I think you have to use... If you're using fakes, you have to use VS Test. There's no way around it, as far as I'm aware. This is such a ball. It's so not what I wanted. There's 1 o'clock, so it's lunchtime, but I feel like I need to do something else. I don't have the drive to do what I want to do, because what I want to do I can't do. So everything I'm doing feels like a fudge. And I hate fudging things. Ladies and gentlemen, I have had lunch and whatnot. I've decided the best way about this is to add a feature on the mutation part of the stuff, which is able to test, basically prepare tests, prepare the test suites and whatnot, because that's where it makes the most sense to do it. If that means that needs to understand what test framework we're using, then that's fine. I was confused earlier. I only want to make this change at the moment for the VS test one. For any others, it will just ignore it. It will just go, okay, well, no preparation needed. But for the MS test areas, that's where we need the most changes. I'm going to try and film Graham here without waking her up because she looks cute as balls. If I continue to talk, she may... There we go, I was literally continue to talk there. Look how cute she looks. Oh, Graham. Oh, Graham, no. She looks so cute. Oh no. Be told, since she started sleeping in a house now, she bloody loves it in there. She packs it tight and everything. Oh no, I'd reset the router, that's why I was in there. Our internet's really, really slow, so I'm just resetting the router, hopefully fixing it. It's on 2 megabytes, man. 2 megabytes, you have an absolute babble. Yeah, just rebooting it. So that's my plan, basically. Add the ability to do this change on thing based on the test runner. So I'll have an area of the mutations that prepare the tests for the test runner. If they're using the internal test runner, see there's duplicate logic there, isn't there? If you use, bearing in mind the internal test runner doesn't exist, if you were to use the internal test runner to do MS test tests, should the internal test runner handle timeouts, or should the mutations handle timeouts? Or do we can the internal test runner completely and just use ones that other people have made? Well, this is the problem. The mutations shouldn't have... If you were to look at this design, you wouldn't assume that the mutations are doing something to the tests. But the entirety of it, there is nowhere inside the mutations that reference the tests at all. At all. They literally go through and deliberately filter them out to not affect them. The idea of the tests is that they stay and remain the absolute golden truth. That is our oracle, that's the word, oracle of truth. That's what the purpose of the tests are. While adding a test attribute to them so that they time out isn't manipulating that. However, you wouldn't expect it to be doing that. If you have a test runner that doesn't require this kind of manipulation, like you use NUnit and then you can, NUnit has a special thing, I don't know, maybe it does XUnit, who knows? MS test. If you're using any of those and they don't require this mutation, and you can do /timeout on the runner itself, then the problem's solved. Then what you've got is you've got a division of responsibility between the two services. You've got one service that is attempting to do a timeout and another service that's also doing a timeout. Like, who is in control? Who's in charge of that piece of information? No one. You have to either commit to mutating the tests all the time, or have a weird implementation where in some scenarios this is doing something, in some scenarios this is doing something. If it's a Tuesday and if the moon's in this position it does this. That's bad. So, what we have to do then, ladies and gentlemen, quite simply, is to deal with the fact that VS Test has this flaw, this fundamental flaw, that means that you can't do timeouts on it very well. Now that's a bitch. It means that running VS Test is going to have to be quite slow because you're going to have to put in a... Fuck, but that's not even a good solution to it. Oh my god, why does life have to be so bloody difficult? Because this all comes down to the fact that MS fakes... Here's another thing. Wait, what am I trying to say here? In the scenario where you don't have MS fakes, you can use the internal test runner. The internal test runner does everything. The internal test runner is the perfect thing. It's the solution. That is the best solution that we have, because we want the test runner to be in charge of how long each test has. If one of the test runners that I rely on doesn't have that functionality, then I don't have the best possible system, and it's going to fuck up the entire architecture based on that fact, because there are things that are going to be doing stuff that they're not supposed to do. That's the bitch. That's what I really despise about this. That's the problem I'm trying to get around. If a unit test spins off into an infinite loop that doesn't increase RAM or do something crazy like go over like max overflow or whatever on an integer, if it doesn't do that, which is very, very likely, well, it's not very likely, but it's possible, like 50% chance of it happening, so yeah, pretty likely, then killing the process now. If I can I get onto a breakpoint here? I think I can. Leaves it running. And it sits there in an infinite loop forever because Microsoft don't know how to fucking write a task manager. I don't know what to do, guys. It's stressing me out. I can't live my life like this. Also, right, here's something that annoys me. When you look at online people asking questions and stuff, someone else says here, is it possible to trigger the unit test execution programmatically instead of manually doing it in Visual Studio? I'm not a tester though, we are just assigned to research these things. Thanks in advance. Someone says, this question is not clear at all. Everything is always executed at runtime, a test or not. And the person replied saying, runtime means executing it programmatically. The person goes, yes, but everything is executed at runtime, so what's so special about the test? It's blatantly fucking obvious. He says he doesn't want to do it manually in Visual Studio. He wants to do it from code. Like, what's so difficult to comprehend? Why are programmers going to be so finicky all the time? It really annoys me. Oh, is it obvious how stressed I am? We go back to the premise of dropping fakes or dropping VS test. If we drop fakes, I can run my internal test runner. If I drop MS test, I still have to use my internal test runner, but ladies and gentlemen, we are heading off to bed. We have an early start tomorrow because we've got 2 cars to go and look at. Here's a well, it's going to be too late by the time you talk to me, but if these 2 cars are still there, there is a 2006 Polo and a 2007 Clio, Renault Clio. Now the Polo is a Polo, but otherwise it's quite basic. The Renault is a Renault, but it's actually got all the mod cons and stuff. And it's got a bigger engine in. I feel like I prefer the Clio to the Polo after this all day. But anyway, we are heading off to bed, like I say. Oh, just update and shut down. Thanks, Atlas. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? We have had an interesting evening catching up on, well, not catching up on, but starting the last, well, Series 4 of House of Cards. 2 episodes down, because we've got to make up for tomorrow, because we're not going to be able to watch any tomorrow. Bloody love House of Cards, it's great. And it's really good watching House of Cards and it being new again. Because I've obviously watched like from Series 1, 2 and 3 again with Laura. So it's been really good. Otherwise, we had dinner and watched Gogglebox and stuff and just kind of like chilled. But that time is enough for me. I feel like the mutations should just have the logic to do that. There shouldn't be a scenario. It goes, okay, what test framework are we testing? Okay, VS test, sweet, or VS/MS test, cool, go through, put the timeout flags on, happy days. If there's one that doesn't require that, then that's just a thing that we deal with. If there's one that does require it, then that we can just add it in. So it'll ignore ones that it doesn't recognise and do things to other ones. I mean, if it's a case of a test runner is available where it has implicit timeouts on a method by method basis, then by all means we'll go with that, because that's the best way. That's what I wanted from my internal test room. But I think we need a way to be able to support systems that don't have that, and one of the biggest doesn't. So I feel like I've come to the decision that it's going to have to be done. So we're going back and we're going to, when we pull down the code solution, we'll analyse, well, we'll pull out the information about what test runner we're going to run it on, and then we'll go, right, okay, so that means we're looking for this. So in the same way that my internal test runner would go, oh, you're running an MS test, then look for the test method attribute. What we'll do is we'll go, oh, look for the test method attribute, but change it to a test method timeout attribute instead. But words, things, stuff. That is the best way of doing it. It's a dirty way, but it's a way I'm going to have to deal with. And it was good just to like take my mind off it to come to that conclusion. It just feels like today has been a bit of a dead day because of that. But otherwise, Graham, who's getting into a bikini body for tomorrow because Beth and Ben are coming. Tomorrow, we're going to go look at 2 cars. Maybe pick one. Who knows? We've been... Dad and the person who helped me pick my Punto has thrown doubts into your mind as they've said that like we've spent money on it, so why not keep it? Well, like we've spent money on it, so why not let's stop spending money on it? So, but I do feel like it's probably best to get rid still, especially if we can find a good alternative. But then otherwise we've got lots of cooking to do tomorrow, so we're going to do a cooking with Jamie vlog, and lots of cooking tomorrow. And then Beth and Ben are coming for double date night dinner, come down with me style here. It's going to be grand. I'll catch you later.